Hi, welcome to another episode of Hot Takes. I have been saying that given both Westminster and Holyrood's attack constantly on landlords, making things harder, imposing more restrictions, imposing more bureaucracy, limiting the rights of landlords, extending the rights of tenants, and so forth, especially let's have no fault evictions, and of course the whole slew of problems that were caused during the COVID thing with no evictions and all that sort of thing, that I suggested that landlords would exit. And we finally have proof that I'm right and this is happening. Up until now, I've just been saying it because I know the industry, having worked in it for so long. But not a landlord, an estate agent has put in a freedom of information request into the Scottish government, and he's found out some pretty terrifying numbers. Terrifying if you were a tenant and you need somewhere to live, because a recent investigation has shown that there has been a massive, significant exodus of landlords from the sector. People are selling up, and they're selling up in huge numbers, right? The private rental sector in Scotland is shrinking so fast that it is now becoming problematic. The guy is called David Todd. He heads KW Property Sales Management in Haddington in Edinburgh. That's the estate agents. Now, he submitted this freedom of information request, but he was focusing. Now, the thing is, he's focusing on those property owners who only have one rental property. So that will be people who, say, inherited a parent's house when the parents had died, or, two couples getting married, both had their own house, they rented one out, lived in the other, that sort of thing. Generally, that tends to be it. Or there will be some investment property owners, but they're only going to buy one house because it's going to be their pension kind of thing. They don't want to run a whole business on it. They just want one that's easy, good tenants, run it over, and at the end of the day, that's their pension done. That sort of thing. We're not talking anyone being greedy. We're not talking anyone going in this to skim everybody or anything. It's just that kind of level. And the data that he got back from this freedom of information request makes, as I say, very, very worrying and grim reading. In May 2019, there were 228,212 such landlords. This is the single property landlord. As of June this year, so 5 years, that number plunged to 179,516. That's 50,000 landlords. 50,000 landlords got out. 50,000 properties gone. That's like somewhere. It's more than a quarter. It's more than a quarter of the properties have gone. A quarter of the properties gone. Now, that's just the ones with one. I'm sure there'll be people who've got two or three that have got out as well. You're seeing a drop in available properties like never before in history. And when you get a shortage of properties, rents go up. But not only do rents go up, it literally means there are nowhere for people who desperately need a home to rent. They're just not there. They're not available at any price because they're literally not there. Now, Todd himself, he says that this is all down, he says, to policy, governmental policy, both Westminster and a Holyrood policy. He says these decisions made by the governments, both of them, have basically so wrecked the sector, so imposed such draconian measures on landlords that they're just not bothered anymore. They just can't be bothered to go to all the time, trouble, and expense of renting out property they own. And so they're not, and they're getting rid of it. It's a risk. Like anything, they're risking. When you put a tenant in, you're risking that tenant is going to pay and isn't going to damage the property. How many times do you hear these horror stories of tenants who come in, pay the deposit, pay 1 month up front, and then never pay again, and it can take a year, 15, 18 months, 2 years even, to get them out. And in the meantime, they're just letting the whole property run to rot. It's no wonder that, the tenants, the landlords don't want this. And then when you have government saying, we're going to make it harder for you as a landlord to get rid of tenants. We're going to give you this and do this and do this. And then they wonder why people aren't renting properties out and they're getting out of that sector. And then they're complaining, well, wait, we need more rental properties. Well, you think? When you think, where are all the rental properties gone? You, the governments, have destroyed it. You've made it so difficult. You've sided so much with the tenant that you've actually screwed the tenants. And now the tenants are suffering because of your constant push for the right of the tenant. Well, that's great. The tenants have got all the rights in the world. They just don't have anywhere to live. And that's what's happening now. And he said, you've got a political system that for some reason is anti-landlord. And yet the same system is desperate for landlords because they're desperate for rental properties. You can't win. He says the only reset is you give landlords more power, you take powers and rights away from tenants and let landlords go in and be landlords and encourage them. He says because otherwise the whole sector will die. And he's right. And I've seen it. I know people who've had, several properties. I know a guy who had like 20 odd properties. I think he's down to one. And I said, what do you do? He said, I sold them all. He said, the pain in the ass. He said, COVID screwed it. He said, so I just got rid of them all. He said, I've kept one. He said, that one's there. He says, and the only reason I'm keeping that one is that's the one that I'm going to give to my son in a couple of years' time. So in a couple of years' time, he's going to kick those tenants out and just give that house to his son. He said, well, and he's put the money into the stock market and, he says, well, it's just there. Just earning cash. I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry about maintenance. I don't have to worry about legals, anything like that. Why should I? And who can blame him? Who can blame him? The government have caused this. Both the governments have caused this. Well, in his case, just the British government because he's in England. But it's going to be a story repeated all over. And this is entirely it. You keep making more complex layers for landlords. You keep imposing penalties on landlords. They want to now bring in registration for no reason whatsoever. Watch as landlords go. And the next round where you can't evict someone if they're going to have mental health problems if you evict them will be the final straw. And there'll be no private rental properties in Britain. And they're not building enough social housing. So where are you going to put these people? Under the bridges, hand out cardboard boxes. That's all that's left. Well done, government, both of them. Well done, all you politicians. What a marvellous bunch you are. Let me know what you think. Speak soon. Goodbye.